Good afternoon. Welcome to IoT North Food for Thought. Today we're talking about IoT in retail. Just a couple of housekeeping things. This show is a weekly show where we give you the opportunity to talk about your business, the solutions, the technology within IoT, but also the business side of things as well. So, we often forget about thinking about the challenges that we can have within business, the psychology of it, the sales processes, thinking outside of the box on new ways of doing things. So if you have anything that you'd like to talk about on that, please do comment or email info@iotnorth.uk. Today we have Jordan Appleson from Hark. He is the CEO there. Absolutely fantastic startup, scale-up business from Leeds. So let me just give Jordan, bring him in. Hi, good afternoon, Jordan. How are you?
Hi, Paul. I'm really well, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure. Jordan, would you like to share and introduce yourself and share the story of Hark Systems?
Yeah, absolutely. So Hark are an industrial IoT and energy analytics company based in Leeds. We set up in 2016 and effectively built a platform and some hardware to connect to any industry standard sensor, building management system, energy storage system, industrial process automation controllers. And we actually started off in life sciences, monitoring the likes of stability storage chambers, temperature, regulatory compliance in kind of labs and pharmaceutical process factories, that kind of stuff. And over the last few years, we've made a big push for energy and industrial IoT devices. So right now we work with the likes of Sainsbury's, Asda. We've got glass companies on the platform, and what we're doing with them is monitoring assets in real time. So every 60 seconds, energy data, consumption data, process data, to help them analyze their asset performance and automatically control things like their buildings and assets based on energy prices, occupancy, different changes and shifts in what their assets do throughout the day. So yeah, it's we've got 24,000 assets for one customer, for example, on the platform, thousands of gateways, hundreds of millions of metrics go through the platform a day, and we do a lot of edge-based machine learning too. So it's quite an interesting space to be in.
So this is absolutely awesome. We've spoken a couple of times over the past few weeks, and I've been absolutely blown away with the journey that you've had in such a short space of time with Hark Systems. Really going from that, the collection of the data. It's the great story of IoT. Connect something, collect the data, start to understand the data, then start to build towards that automation and the holy grail of autonomy. It's really interesting in the success that you've had with retail as well. But has retail really adopted IoT, or is it still in that POC kind of stage, proof of concept stage?
I think it depends who you ask, to be honest. So in the retail space, I suppose if we talk about the supermarkets, especially, maybe not necessarily the retail space like the kind of almost kind of the high street stores, but if you take a look at some of the supermarkets or anyone with like refrigeration systems, HVAC systems who spend a lot of money on like energy, you could say that they've been doing IoT since before IoT was a thing, and a lot of the teams would. And I think what's happened over the last 10 years is obviously technology has become much more accessible to be able to collect more high fidelity data and do more advanced control or analytics, and that therefore requires more data. So I think retail is definitely adopting more proof of concepts in certain areas. So the areas that we work in are energy, but we also have some machine vision technology for things like the Amazon Go style smart stores that was born out of our occupancy control piece. So there's definitely push for it. So there is adoption, but it's kind of, in certain cases, it could be marginal gains, or it's about what you do with the data and how you actually, upgrade a system through a proof of concept to maybe collect real-time energy data of individual assets to then do something with that to drive down maybe carbon or cost, for instance. So it depends. I'd say yes, retail are definitely adopting IoT, but it depends on the stage of the journey that the retailers are on.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting that you mentioned there about machine vision. I'm really intrigued to understand how the retail stores have come about seeing that as a sensor to use. So how did that come about with the conversations you had? Was it something you took to them, or was it something they came to you and said, "Hey, we've heard about this, we're interested"?
Yeah, so it was a bit of a mix. So we work with a partner on a lot of the machine vision technology and a lot of machine learning models, and we originally started a couple of years ago with controlling buildings based on occupancy was the primary kind of driver for that, and we used cameras. We were looking at working with a business to kind of use cameras, because as a sensor you can do a lot more with that than just say a PIR, or using CO2 to work out occupancy in maybe rooms. And when we demonstrated some of this technology to one of the retailers, one of the supermarkets, we got into the discussion about what else we could use this for. Could we use this for, detecting people taking things off shelves, or detecting potential, different scenarios that were definitely doable because it's a camera, and as long as you've got machine, the correct hardware, you could probably train models to do that. And then from there, we kind of spun out kind of almost a joint partnership with a company who spun out of ARM, essentially, the chip manufacturer.
Yeah.
Or I say chip manufacturer, more like IP company, who then license out their tech to manufacturers. And we kind of went from there, and now we have a couple of customers on the platform for some of that POC, moving on to more bigger pilots for things like heat mapping of stores, and looking at like I said, people taking things off shelves, and how do you detect that as part of smarter shopping experiences. But yeah, so it's a very interesting place. I mean, obviously we have our energy analytics and industrial IoT business focuses on manufacturers and controlling Tesla batteries based on things like energy prices, preventive maintenance, that kind of thing. But then obviously spinning out in that machine vision space has been really interesting to see how IoT is used in that area as well. So yeah, really, really cool.
So I mean, that's a whole new skill level in some respects, as a presumption of mine, of moving from traditional sensors. I know we're going off a little piece on the questions that I'd shared with you, but I'm quite intrigued by this on the different skills that are required for your business with incorporating vision, and the skill sets that are required there with data science and such like. Would that be a correct presumption?
Yeah, I think within the IoT space, the idea of getting data out of any device as a skill set is kind of multifaceted, right? You might have edge-based, firmware protocols like MQTT, CoAP, Modbus, BACnet, whatever, and it ranges from industrial protocols to what we see as kind of, the full stack, technical area.
Yeah.
And as long as you've got a good grounding in that, then getting data from one end of the internet to the other securely, and then moving that into graphs or analytics pipelines is relatively, it's a set of skills, and that's straightforward. The machine vision side in and of itself is a whole skill set in and of itself. You have to be able to have skills around the vision side. So how do you actually process footage? You've got to be able to create model architectures. You've got to be able to create training pipelines. You've got to then figure out how to distribute those models down to the edge, and they're big models. We're talking, they can be gigabytes. And then you've got to also go down the whole quality of data, and also there's a whole ethics piece behind that as well, because obviously if you're training models that have potential people in it, you don't want personally identifiable information, any biometrics, anything like that. So you have to be very, and you also don't want to your models want to be trained not to be biased against any type of demographic or potential the different demographics of people, and you don't want any bias in there. So that in itself, whole skill set. That's why we work very closely in a joint partnership, because it requires significant skills, and but you learn a lot on the way, and it's been very, very much an eye opener the last 2 years on this, for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure it has. If anybody has any questions for Jordan or myself whilst we're live here, please do ask them in the comments as we're saying there, or just say hi. It'd be great to hear from you. So getting back on to the questions that we had. What value are the retailers looking to gain from the adoption of the IoT that you've been providing them over the past few years?
Yeah, depends again who you ask and what the core business case is. So value in our space typically revolves around kind of a few areas. So we want to help businesses increase efficiency, maximize yield, and reduce waste. And typically we do that with energy and asset performance. So big push on net zero, right? A lot of our technology is used in the energy space, right? So that is to highlight inefficiencies with energy on assets and automatically detect anomalies and then alert the relevant people. It might be reducing carbon, tracking cost at a much higher granularity than typically was, the old school, we'll call it the old school IoT, maybe the half hourly data, which is your smart meters, because we typically do data minute by minute. And what that allows us to do is really track the performance of assets from an energy perspective, to be able to really optimize those assets and then automatically control assets based on weather patterns, occupancy patterns. And then therefore, what you can do is, instead of a building, for instance, being at this set point, it might be a refrigeration system at this set point and a HVAC system at this set point. And typically those things, from a supermarket perspective, are fighting each other. You've got weather conditions, occupancy conditions. What you can do is train on that high fidelity data. If you collected the assets, have a particular profile, you can effectively on the edge inference what the assets should be doing and change set points all the way through the day based on forward forecasts of weather data, previous information, and so on and so forth. And that can then optimize a building, right? And what that basically gives you is a more intelligent way of controlling and therefore reducing costs, reducing carbon. And when energy prices change or grid carbon intensity changes, you can do that on an asset or a building, and it's quite an interesting piece. And then finally, the value there is cost, carbon, net zero, those types of movement towards a smarter, more green way of working. And then on the machine vision side, it's actually a little bit different. It's more around what value. Okay, well, there's value to being able to provide a better customer experience. For instance, one of there's use cases such as being able to put loose fruit and loose items in front of a camera, self-checkout, and instead of having to key in buttons, it'll just go, hey, well, you've got an apple, it's this, and you don't have to touch anything. So that's all about frictionless experience in the retail space. But then you've got something a little bit more maybe less customer focused and more focused on the bottom line, which is theft. Right, there's a huge amount of theft from self-checkouts that happens, and you can use machine vision technology to almost detect that in real time and almost action things like locking self-checkouts, for instance, or alerting the relevant people to potential theft as it happens in real time. And that has a significant value to the retailer in terms of their bottom line. I think something like 30 to 50 million for some of the top 5 supermarkets are each. It can be anywhere between 30 and 40 million a year in loss from just self-checkouts alone, and if they have the self-checkouts, that is. And then if you look at the global market for that, in terms of shrink and loss, we're talking 100 billion a year globally in loss just from shrink, which is kind of an insane amount of money. So different value on different ends of the spectrum. Machine vision has a lot more use cases and it's more broad. I'd say it's more expensive to deploy because you got cameras and GPUs on the edge. And then on the net zero and industrial side, there's a huge green carbon aspect to what we do over here.
Is there also an element of ensuring, with the refrigerators being at the right temperatures and that predictive maintenance, but also making sure that they're abiding by regulation with that data being collected as well?
Yeah, I mean, health and safety is a massive thing. That obviously, any of the supermarkets or the retailers that deal with food in that respect are already obviously have to hit that health and safety piece. They have to monitor and store all that data for several years. Yeah. And that's always, 10 years ago, that was the case, and it was there, and that was there. So it's not about reinventing the wheel with that already exists. I suppose the preventative action, the preventative maintenance, again, there is already things out there and have been that support the reduction in cost of maintenance. However, it is based on data and collecting data, I suppose a lower fidelity, right? Which means that your accuracy to be able to pinpoint potential issues and sooner, that's not typically been there. Not only that, you've also got the ability to prioritize now on that high fidelity data what the forecasted problem or cost would be if this isn't fixed with, again, a higher granularity. And that allows you to prioritize and reduce, I would say, alerts across a significantly larger state. That you might have tens of thousands of assets. You get a lot of alerts. Some alerts pop up and then go away within an hour, and you you've spent an hour looking at something that might have just been ephemeral, temporary, transient, whatever. So being able to then accurately predict and forecast what that problem would be and give it an importance score and a cost score, those are the kinds of things that we're able to do these days a little bit more.
So, what future tech will help further? You know, where do you think we will, when and where do you think we will be, saying with the evolution of tech? You know, you were mentioning about using vision as a sensor. That that is evolving at a rapid rate, with more and more tools coming together to make it easier to adopt. Well, what's your thoughts of the future?
Yeah. The drive on the energy and the industrial IoT side, there's a huge future in dynamic control and smart intelligent asset control for optimizing buildings and assets, right? Like you've just got to look at what the National Grid are doing with their new effectively services that they're deploying to make it easier for smaller assets to be involved in propping the grid up when it's required, and being really smart around how we do that. Huge potential in that. And using those existing assets that without having to replace things, like refrigeration systems that are 20 years old or 15 years old, they work totally cool. Like they're totally cool. They're totally fine. You don't need to replace them or make them any smarter on in terms of the hardware than they already are. You just need to layer on some intelligence. There's a huge push in that area, and I think that's a future to get us to net zero that we'll definitely see. I think in the machine vision space in retail, because you've got so much potential in one sensor, that camera, you can run. I've seen multiple machine models running on a single stream, outputting various bits of data, that's running today in our Hark platform, which is super cool to see.
Yeah.
What's really interesting is how that will translate to things like supply chain, like stock on shelves, right? Imagine being that, stock on shelves is a big thing for supermarkets to keep value and keep products on the shelves at any one time. Now, typically the stock on shelves piece would be, for example, look at the transaction log, what's out every few hours. They'll check what looks empty, what isn't. Using cameras, you can obviously detect which shelves are empty, right? But that would send a real-time signal to the relevant people to stock it. That's actually been there kind of, there's already stuff that does that. Where it gets really interesting is supply chain, is when you take that and go, okay, take that data in real time and look at, okay, which depots have stock, and are you doing things like checking the depot systems to work out how quickly can we get product from depot to shelf based on all of these alerts and looking at vision. And there's a big future in that, I think. Again, those same cameras running in the depots potentially could be used for health and safety, for keeping an eye on whether pallets, for instance, what we're seeing is pallets, whether they're safe to go on the back of effectively trucks, and also if they go into automated systems, because a lot of depots are automating right now, but they can't actually handle when pallets maybe have things sticking out of them, right? And it's all of these things that machine vision has the ability to help solve on that single sensor. So again, two different areas within retail, and I think there's a huge future in both areas. And we're seeing that time and again when we're having conversations with our big customers.
Yeah, there was a company that I worked with recently where they have a solution which started with enabling smart pallets, which was basically enabling pallet packers to make sure that they had the right inventory on a pallet. What they then expanded that to, which was a meat distribution business in the US, was they enabled them to then be able to be smart with recognizing that actually a certain cut of beef was selling higher in Florida than what it was in Chicago. But Chicago was holding a lot of stock of that meat. That then they would recognize that and be able to transport that meat on a truck or whatever, or train that was going to Florida with other stock, that they would put that stock on there because it had more chance of it being sold rather than it being slippage.
Absolutely.
So, it was really interesting to see that evolution of, and I think it is one of those things that there are concerns about using cameras of privacy. But as you and I both know, the camera only sees what you teach it to see. based on the models and how you store that data and such like as well. Computing at the edge, converting it into data at the edge rather than streaming and building up a lot of charge in regards to the data being transited there and having latency and bandwidth issues as well. Jordan, we're just about out of time. Thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it. If you'd like to get in touch with Jordan, you can find him on LinkedIn, and we have the company URL. There we go, hogsys.com. Check out the guys. It is amazing to talk with a company that isn't just slideware. I have to say that I've been uber impressed with what you guys are doing. You really are delivering on IoT, and it's absolutely fantastic to see. So congratulations in such a short space.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks so much. Awesome.
No
Thanks so much for having me.
Welcome. I'm sure I'll have you on again very soon, mate. We will have another show next Thursday at 12:30. Thanks very much for your time, and goodbye.